We are taught that vaccines stop the children from carrying the germs that we are vaccinating against. And study after study shows that children who are vaccinated can still carry the germ despite having received the vaccine. So, the vaccinated are still capable of spreading disease, but the unvaccinated are being unfairly blamed because of a consensus opinion, but not true science. To repeat, no study, no science has ever proven that vaccines eliminate the existence of the organism in your body. If anything, science is showing that the vaccines cause the organisms to mutate. And there are plenty of articles showing that strains are replaced by new strains after vaccination, similarly to the way antibiotics are bringing about new strains of bacteria because of the overuse of antibiotics. So why are we blaming the unvaccinated children? No study has ever been done in this country appropriately to address the health outcomes of children who are vaccinated versus the children who are unvaccinated. I have been seeing families in my practice for over 20 years that have opted out of vaccination. They are the healthiest children I have ever seen. I have families who have older children who have been vaccinated, middle children who have been partially vaccinated, and then younger children who have not been vaccinated at all. And those families are rising in number, and they see the difference between the health outcomes of their younger children who are rarely sick versus their older children who are getting IEPs in schools, needing medications, ERs, and constant health issues. And all I get when I hear that, when I state something like that, is, well, that's anecdotal. Well, it's anecdotal if you see it a couple of times, but it's not anecdotal when you see it for over 20 years. And when you speak to parents, and when you speak to teachers, and when you speak to guidance counselors, and when I speak to pediatricians who are too afraid to come out in public. There is pressure to ostracize the families who know the science and know the lack of science that's available. There's a lot of consensus. And when I think about the subject of vaccination, I want to ensure that if we're going to prevent infectious diseases in children, that we don't create something worse in its place. Unfortunately, we're dealing with a lot of beliefs instead of actual science. And beliefs go a long way. I took the oath of first do no harm, but when I look into the science and I don't see long-term studies, and I see only short-term studies up to 4 to 10 days where the side effects are manipulated by the manufacturers, who are the only ones doing the studies on the vaccines. And when I see no placebo groups, and I see no studies of the single ingredients or the combined ingredients, and I see the science, the biochemistry of the ingredients in animal studies, where animals who are given the aluminum are found to have motor delays and behavioral problems, which is a great deal of what we're seeing in children today. I say, are we first doing no harm? And so, first do no harm means the precautionary principle. And more parents are understanding the dangers of vaccines, and that's why we're seeing such pressure to mandate vaccines, because more of the science is coming out. In order to create herd immunity, you have to be able to prove that children who are vaccinated are immune. And the sad part about that is that whenever you vaccinate a population of children, you're always going to have a population that doesn't develop any antibodies at all. The estimates of that are about 10%, that vaccines will fail in 10% of the population. Vaccination, no antibody production. But the next group is even more suspicious, because when you vaccinate and you do produce an antibody, there is science to show that the presence of an antibody doesn't guarantee immunity either. And we don't know the percentage of children who get a vaccine, develop an antibody, but aren't immune at all. We assume that if we vaccinate, we're getting protection. We assume that if we vaccinate, we're stopping spread of disease. Those are assumptions that have never been solidified in science, and I'm happy to offer more explanations during the Q&A. I wouldn't say that if I didn't have the science to prove it. The parents that I work with in New York, that I see around the country, are very concerned that their rights are being taken away, that their knowledge about the science is being pushed away by an agenda that only says unvaccinated children are a problem. Just to wrap up, in New York when we had the measles outbreak, in California when they had a measles outbreak, there were 194 cases. Of the 194 cases, 73 cases were due to the actual virus in the vaccine itself. 73, 38%. 73 cases were due to the measles virus causing measles. All the literature states that measles virus infection is not true measles and should not be counted as a health threat. That means only 121 kids developed measles, 121 people. New York State did not do the proper testing that's given down by the CDC to test every child to see if the children had measles strain, wild type measles, or a mutated measles. There are cases around the country and around the world where in a 95 to 98% vaccinated population, they had measles outbreaks because they found mutated viruses. There, as I said before, there are cases where the virus mutates, where there are strain replacements. New York State did not do the proper testing of the 1,000+ young children and adults who came down with measles. They wrote a little blurb on the CDC website of the 2 wild viruses that were responsible for the measles outbreak. But we in New York know that the testing was not done. 4,200 kids on Long Island had the religious exemption and were not vaccinated. And there was not one case of measles on Long Island. Thank you.